Diane Barnes. I've lived in Boylston for 12 years now, and I live with my husband Steve and my handsome golden retriever Oakley. So I thought tonight I would tell you about me as it relates to publishing, my publishing career. And I've published 4 books with the 5th one to be coming out soon. So I want to talk a little bit about that book and read a short chapter from it at the end, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. During the day, I work in marketing for a healthcare company, and I get to do a lot of writing in that job, which is a great thing because I fell in love with writing in 2nd grade. That's how I got into it. We came back from recess one day, and there were a trail of paper footprints, really large paper footprints, and they led from the door up and down the rows of desks, on top of some desk, under some desk, and out the window. And we had to write a story. The teacher gave us one of those composition books that you get when you're a kid, with the big lines. And the teacher gave us one of those, and she said, please write what you think happened at recess. I was so excited to write, I filled up the entire composition book, and I asked for another. And then I filled that one up, and I asked for another. And when I left for the day, she gave me a huge stack of those composition books to take home with me. And I have been writing ever since then. When I went to college, I didn't really understand that creative writing was something that you could study and get a degree in. So instead, I studied the next best thing, which was journalism. And I learned how to write for a magazine and write for a newspaper. And my first job was at a newspaper. And then I worked for a small magazine. And then I worked in a market research firm in the editing department before switching over to the marketing department. But as I was working those day jobs, I was taking creative writing classes in the evenings. And from those creative writing classes, I wrote a bunch of short stories, and I started what I call my practice novel. Practice because despite spending a few years on that novel, I actually never finished it. But the time was really well served, because with each page I wrote, I felt like my writing improved, and I gained more confidence. And from that experience, the next time I went to write a book, I was determined to finish it. I didn't want to have 2 unfinished manuscripts. So that time to write my 2nd book came. My friend asked me to participate in National Novel Writing Month. And National Novel Writing Month is a challenge to write 50,000 words during the month of November. That's a lot of words for me to write in a month. My books are usually between 75 and 85,000 words, so it's about 2/3 of a book. But we'd meet after work. Borders was still open back then, so we'd meet after work at Borders, and we would just write. And then on the weekends, we'd write. And the month ended, and I had 50,000 words. Not a complete book, but 50,000 words, and they were ugly words. But I was determined to finish that story. So I kept working on it and working on it. And when I got to a point, when I finished the story, and I thought that the writing looked good enough, I gave it to some people to get some feedback. And then based on their feedback, I made revisions. And then I gave it to other people for more feedback. And I kept that cycle up numerous times. And eventually, I got it into a condition which I really liked it. And I sent it out to agents to get an agent. And I was lucky that I got an agent who then sent it to a publisher. And that book became my debut, Waiting for Ethan. And the publisher gave me a 2-book deal. So Waiting for Ethan and Mixed Signals were my first 2 books. Waiting for Ethan is about a young girl. Well, actually, it's about an older woman who tries to turn the wrong man into the right man because of something a fortune teller tells her when she is 13 years old. So Gina Rossi is the main character in the book, and her best friend's grandmother is a psychic. And she gets all her predictions right. And one day, the grandmother tells Gina, you're going to marry a man named Ethan. And Gina believes her. So years later, decades really, Gina meets somebody by the name of Ethan. And she ignores all the red flags because she's convinced that he's the man that she's supposed to marry. So that was my debut. And after that, I wrote Mixed Signals. And Mixed Signals is about a viral breakup. It's about a woman who's dating a man who produces a morning sports radio show. And they're engaged, and just out of nowhere, he breaks off their engagement. And she thinks he's just getting cold feet, so she doesn't really take it seriously, and she doesn't really tell anyone. But then the host of the sports talk show start to talk about it on air. So all her friends find out, her family finds out, and they talk about the breakup, they talk about her relationship, and they even go so far as to have a contest to try to get Nico a new girlfriend. So it's about her overcoming the breakup and her humiliation. My next book was More Than. And More Than is a book that's really dear to my heart. It's about a woman she's a mother and a widow, and she raises two twins on her own. The twins are 4 years old when her husband Patrick passes away, and she becomes just laser focused on raising the kids. She's a helicopter mom, and she buries her emotions by overeating. So she gains some weight, and her only other interest besides the children is a television program called Messages from Beyond. It's about a psychic who claims that she can connect the grieving with their deceased loved ones. The main character, Peggy, dreams about going on the show and connecting with her husband, Patrick. But she doesn't want to call in for tickets because she's self-conscious about her weight. And the kids are going to leave for college, leaving her as an empty nester. And she's really depressed about this. And before they go, they sign her up for a local boot camp class. And at first, Peggy is really insulted, like, why did they give me this? But then she thinks, if I go and I lose weight, I can call in, I can be on the show. Instead, what happens is she goes and she meets a group of women who become her good friends. And they teach her that she's more than a mother, more than a widow, and more than a body type. And that book takes place in Hudson, where I used to live. And why I said it was dear to me, because I was taking a boot camp class in Hudson, and all the women in the class became really good friends. So it was sort of based on the story's not real, but the experience inspired that. So my next book after that was All We Could Still Have. And that story is about a couple trying to have a baby and they can't, and the impact on their marriage. And that story takes place in a fictional town in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, Stapleton, New Hampshire. I wrote that during the pandemic. It was when I was working on it. And during the pandemic, it was just a sad time. And that was, you can tell from my other books, like that's a heavier topic. So I wanted to have a break and I wanted to write something fun and whimsy. And that's when I started the Mulligan Curse. I put All We Could Still Have down for a little while, and I started working on the Mulligan Curse. And the Mulligan Curse is my newest book, which is going to be coming out February 4th in 2 weeks. And it's about regrets. It's about wishing you could go back or make different decisions, or how your life might have turned out if you had made a different decision. The main character, Mary, she's just really sad because her husband ignores her a lot. He plays golf all the time. He doesn't really ignore her. He's just always on the golf course. And her daughter is moving away to London. So Mary's on her own, basically. And she thinks back to when she was in her 20s, and she just wants to go back to that time because she was happier. So I brought an early edition of that book tonight. That book, it takes place in Framingham, Hudson, and here in Boylston. Mary's husband, Dean, is from Boylston, and he plays a lot of golf. So I made up a fictional golf course here in Boylston called Addison Heights Golf Club. And at first when I was writing about Cyprian Keys, and I'll have to tell you how many times I spelled Cyprian wrong in my draft. But I needed to make some tweaks to the setup, so when you write about a real place, people always say, well, that's not what it's really like, so I just made it fictional instead. But it was inspired by Cyprian for sure. But I thought I'd read a little bit from it tonight, just one short chapter, so you can get an idea of what it's like. But first I'll tell you a little bit about what happens in this book before we get to chapter 7. Mary is in her 20s. She has a really good job. She's a reporter, and she loves being a TV reporter. And then she meets Dean, and she sort of becomes a little bit focused on him. And she gets offered a promotion to be the anchor woman. But the catch is she has to move to a different state to be the anchor. And she doesn't want to leave Dean, so she says no. She turns down the promotion, and her colleague takes the job. Her colleague, Liz Collins. And then Liz goes on to great success. She becomes the anchor of CBS Nightly News. So one day when Mary is depressed, having her midlife crisis of sorts, she is in the supermarket and she sees People magazine with Liz Collins on the cover of it under the headline, America's Most Trusted Journalist. And Mary thinks, that should be me. And at the same time she thinks that, she gets a flash of pain in her mouth. So she goes to the dentist, and the dentist tells her, you need to have your wisdom teeth out, which is quite unusual for someone in their 50s. So Mary's a little bit taken back by all that. Right after the dentist appointment, she goes to lunch with her cousin Darby. And she tells Darby that she needs to get her wisdom teeth out. And Darby tells her there's a family magical gene. You need to be able to suspend disbelief for this one. Yeah. There's a magical gene, and it allows you to go back to the age you were when you made the decision you regret, if you have your wisdom teeth removed. Well, of course, Mary doesn't believe Darby, but she thinks, well, that'd be really great if it were true. And then her teeth hurt so much that she goes to get her wisdom teeth removed. And so this chapter picks up, her husband Dean has just dropped her off at the dentist. She's in the dentist office, and he's just sedated her. So the last thing that's happened to Mary is she's basically fallen asleep in the dentist's chair. A loud beeping woke Mary. Her jaw ached, and there was a terrible taste in her mouth. What happened to me? She turned toward Dean's side of the bed and jolted upright. Not only was he not lying beside her, but the mattress was much smaller than her California queen. This wasn't her bed. She jumped up and looked around. Where am I? Her mind felt groggy, making it impossible to think clearly. A sense of déjà vu overwhelmed her. She had been here before. Maybe? The light gray walls didn't jibe with her memory. They'd been eggshelled the last time she was here. The gingham striped blackout curtains had been sheer pink panels, and the hardwood floor had been a dingy oatmeal-colored carpet. The layout of the space was the same, though. Sloped ceiling, windows on the walls to the left and right of the bed, and a tiny closet on the opposite wall. Outside, clanking metal replaced the beeping. A dumpster being emptied? Yes, that annoying commotion had woken her every Wednesday morning for the 4 years she lived in the apartment in Framingham. Why was she dreaming about her old apartment? The last thing she remembered was Dean dropping her off at the dentist. She rolled her tongue over the empty sockets in the back of her mouth, and Darby's crazy story came rushing back. That's why she was dreaming about the place she lived in during her 20s. The thought bothered her. It seemed too reasonable for a dream. She raced around the room toward the mirror. When she saw her old, or rather young face staring back, she blinked hard and leaned closer to the image. This is not possible. She squeezed her eyes shut and opened them again. Her crow's feet had vanished. Her forehead was on line. Her laugh lines weren't as deep. Thick golden brown hair without a strand of gray hung to her shoulders. Her neck was smooth. Even her teeth were whiter. No, this can't be happening. Her heart thumped, and she couldn't catch her breath. A panic attack. She hadn't had one in so long. They'd plagued her through her early 20s, but had stopped after she'd married Dean. Dean! She'd glanced down at her hand. Her wedding ring was gone. Instead of her usual French manicure, her fingernails were painted in aqua blue. A fitness tracker around her wrist had replaced the silver Cartier watch Dean had given her on their 10th anniversary. She pressed a button on the Fitbit's side, and the device lit up, revealing it was 10 o'clock on Wednesday, June 12th, the exact day, time, and year of her appointment to have her wisdom teeth removed. She couldn't swallow. The pain streaked across her chest. Calm down, it's only a dream. She took a deep breath in through her mouth and slowly released it through her nose. Usually dreams had at least one bizarre element that made no sense. She had to find something nonsensical to let her know this was a dream. She would look out the window and see a beach instead of a street in Framingham. Yes, that's it. She pushed back the curtain. There was no ocean or sand, just the plaza with the pizza shop, drugstore, and bank that had stood there for years. She watched as the dump truck that had emptied the dumpster pulled into traffic. She left the bedroom, headed down the hall, and descended the 3 small steps into the sunken living room. A sofa, coffee table, and television crowded the area. She didn't remember the space being so small, but maybe she'd been spoiled by the Wayne Theater-sized living room in her and Dean's Hudson home. The first time she moved into this place, she had swelled with pride when she signed the lease. $325 a month, a bargain because it was an attic apartment with 38-step wooden staircase leading to its only entrance. Still, it was her very own home. She'd finally felt like a grown-up. Why in the world had she been in such a rush to become an adult? Her stomach growled. Is it possible to have hunger pains in a dream? The kitchen walls had a fresh coat of gray paint. The cabinets had been refaced with cherry stain, and the appliances were modern versions of the older ones that she had used when she lived here. She rubbed her temples. The dream was more logical than any other she'd ever had. Memories washed over her as she ran her hand over the dark gray countertops. Her parents had been alive when she lived here. Once a month, on Sundays, she'd make them brunch, usually coconut-encrusted French toast with hash browns, but sometimes omelets with sourdough toast. It wasn't the food that was special about those mornings. No, it was the stories her parents had shared about their lives. She'd learned so much about them after she'd grown up and moved out of her childhood home. Her mom had been a high school track star, and her dad had been president of the student council and voted most likely to succeed. They'd stopped coming to Mary's apartment after her father's stroke because he could no longer climb the long staircase that led to her door. Her eyes filled with tears. If she was dreaming she was young again, why couldn't it be the 1990s when her parents were still alive? A red wristlet resting on the kitchen table caught her attention, and she rushed across the room to examine it. When she unzipped it, credit cards, coins, and dollar bills spilled out onto the floor. As she gathered them, on one of the plastic cards, she noticed the blue and white logo of Channel 77, the independent cable news network, along with the picture of the face she'd just seen in the mirror. For a long moment, she studied the photo. She looked like she was trying to stop herself from laughing. When she was really 24, every time she looked at a picture or a reflection, she found faults with herself. Her eyes were too close together. She had a horrible cow look. Her pores were like sink holes. Her lips were too puffy. Looking at the picture of her young face now, her 54-year-old brain realized that 20-something Mary had been beautiful. She even thought she resembled Olivia Wilde. Yes, she most definitely did. Her eyes moved from the image of her young self to the name on the card, Mary Mulligan. She'd been Mary a model for so long that seeing her maiden name was like seeing the name of an old friend she'd lost touch with and couldn't wait to reconnect with. The last name Mulligan also made her think of Darby. Was it possible she'd been telling the truth? No, of course not. But holy moly, if this wasn't a dream? The badge must mean she worked for Channel 77. She laughed out loud, not believing she was actually considering that this all might be real and not a drug-induced dream in the dentist chair. But oh, if it was real, she could change her entire life, wipe away all her regrets. She'd be the best reporter to have ever worked for the independent cable news network. Everywhere she went, people would know her and rave about her work. The station would offer her a promotion. This time she'd accept it, and the entire trajectory of her life would change. She'd return to her 54-year-old self as the country's most trusted broadcaster, working for ABC or NBC. Liz could keep her job at CBS. Mary wanted to knock off one of the men, so 2 women would be anchoring the nightly news. Dean could compare her with Liz in real time, watching Mary on the television and Liz on his laptop, or maybe using the screen within the screen feature with Mary on the larger screen. He'd see she was better. Outside, a motorcycle drove by, startling her. The sound had been so lifelike. Usually loud sounds and dreams woke her. Not this time. Maybe this wasn't a dream. She didn't know whether to celebrate or curl into a fetal position and hide under the table. She would do neither. Instead, she'd find her cousin so Darby could explain what was going on. So that's chapter 7, when Mary wakes up to find that she's 24 again. In the rest of the book, Mary realizes that her life was really good. Her life as a 54. She comes to appreciate it a lot more, and she's desperate to return to it. But there seems to be no way back. So it's her struggling to find a way back. Like I said, it was a pandemic, and I just wanted to work on something kind of fun and goofy.